Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive videos, I'm going to explore the journey of the sultry Venus through the sign of Pisces, where she is exalted. This begins on the 11th of March at 9:21 p.m. and goes on for 24 days through to April the 5th. Now I'm going to share with you some of the characteristics of Venus, but also what we can expect in the sign of Pisces. But we have to look at the event chart when this process begins, because that gives us the overview. And it's very interesting where Venus is located. Now I'm going to use Greenwich, not because I'm British, but because it's the prime meridian. And this is a point that we can all collectively, globally relate to. Now, if I base my ascendant on Eastern, it would be wrong for anyone living in California. Also, Eastern is going to be wrong for anyone who lives down south. So that's why I choose Greenwich. It's not because I'm British. It's because what we can all collectively relate to within the construct, which, to be honest, unless we base it on exactly where we live, it is a construct. But that is why I use that construct. And in that context, Venus is in the 4th house, which is very much to do with home and family. But within that chart, with an ascendant in Scorpio at 3 degrees, it does mean 2 planets are in the 7th house of that chart, and that is governed by Venus. Yet the 2nd house is empty. So the money part of this journey is, I feel, going to be somewhat secondary. Now Venus is going to forge an absolutely stunning link to Jupiter, its other planet of fortune, and that's going to occur exactly on March the 24th. But Venus is running into heavy weather before that, as it goes into a conjunction with Saturn. If you have got a weakness in a relationship, it's going to be revealed, quite frankly, due to that particular aspect. Also, we have Venus clashing with Black Moon Lilith on March the 27th. What does that mean? And whilst Venus does forge an energizing and unpredictable angle to Uranus on March the 26th, it is going alongside Neptune as we go into April. That can create mystery, but it can create confusion. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining us. This is very much a community. If you have any points, please share them. I interact with each comment. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for your company once more. Your likes, comments, shares and subscriptions are genuinely appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe, please click or tap the bell notification symbol, because every time I drop a video you will get an update. And just before I go on, if you want a free natal relationship reading, all you've got to do is click on the link beneath this video and you can get a prediction based on your relationship prospects absolutely on me. Please see below for more. So Venus in Pisces is a very romantic place for Venus to be if you've got it natally. But of course it's not just having it natally. What house is it in? What influences does it forge to other planets? You could have it in this romantic exalted zone and be opposite Pluto in the cold sign of Virgo. So we cannot just focus on the planet in the sign. We have to look at the big picture. That is absolutely crucial. But certainly people who've got Venus in Pisces can be very giving, very sacrificing, and perhaps really go beyond what they should at times in terms of really investing in a relationship. And that can make people with Venus in Pisces susceptible to being used. So around relationships over the next few weeks, it is going to be important to keep a strong awareness of our boundaries. One of the things that Venus in Pisces does give people is an enormous appreciation, however, of the arts, of culture, of music, and anything to do with things like pottery or painting, because obviously Venus's rulership of Taurus is brilliant for those kind of handcrafts, but if we can also access our imagination and the spiritual dimension that comes from Pisces, better still. So on the screen now, I'm showing the equal house chart of this event, and that gives us an ascendant at 3 degrees and 34 in the intense Scorpio. But there's Jupiter, the planet of fortune, the planet of potential, in the 7th house. 7th house energy very much equates, as I mentioned before, to the more Libran influence that Venus brings to proceedings. But it's pretty close to Uranus. Remember, they're tightening up into a conjunction, which they start to do by the end of March within 3 degrees. And of course, that becomes exact on the 21st of April. But it is going on through to the 5th of May within 3 degrees. But that relationship potential between those two is emphasized. But look at Venus. It's down there in house 4, where we're craving peace, tranquility. If you've been wanting to give your home some kind of decorative makeover, Venus going through Pisces is certainly a fine time to do it, because this event chart is the influence that's going to provide the backdrop for the whole 24 days. But what's not to like? Well, it's that Mars is also in the 4th house, and it's in that very tense right angle with Uranus. So as much as Venus may crave peace, tranquility, whether it's on a personal level, whether it's in terms of our work or in terms of our family, the 4th house, there's Mars and Uranus. Despite Uranus being very close to Jupiter in that 7th house, giving us that relating potential, if there is any issue that's creating some tension, then Mars squaring with Uranus suggests that all the diplomacy in the world that Venus can bring is not going to be enough. And I want to show you also the event chart, because if we look at the position of the moon, yes, it's very close to the node and very close to Chiron, but in the 6th house. So that's asking us to think about where we can be practical, not romantic. So we can talk about Venus being exalted in Pisces. We have to look at the astrology. And the best astrology is based on that true meridian, because we can all collectively relate to it. Now, let's have a little look and see what it appears from an event chart from a solar perspective. So you can see Venus is in house 12. What's the significance of that? Because Pisces is the 12th sign. What does Venus in the 12th house mean? Well, if you have Venus in the 12th house in your natal chart, the chances are you have experienced betrayals in your life. You may be someone who can be a little bit secretive about your relationships. You may be someone who likes to work in an artistic way behind the scenes, and that could be through deep meditations. It could be as a healer. Venus in the 12th house could work magnificently well. But Venus in the 12th house suggests that for us all, if there is a relationship of any kind with a colleague, a boss, a family member, a partner that's not working very well, as Venus advances and goes into that conjunction with Saturn, it is going to be a break point, or a point where things really get cold. We can't just talk about the exaltation. We have to talk about the astrology. So the astrology, particularly on March the 21st, is very, very tense. And it really starts from the 20th and it goes on through to the 24th, when Venus applies to Saturn, particularly in the 12th house, the 12th sign. There could be some psychological revelations that are going to come up whether we like them or not. So even in a good relationship, maybe someone will make some observations about what they don't like or find difficult that they haven't shared before, because the 12th house is about secret enemies. And there could be someone masquerading as your friend, or creating some kind of fronts of affection, because Venus, through its rulership of Libra, can be superficial. And we all need to just be aware of sincerity. Sincerity is very important. But as ever is the case in astrology, you can get overlays of challenging and more positive influences at the same time. And so it is here, because Venus and Jupiter, Venus the lesser, Jupiter the greater benefics in traditional astrology, they are the planets of fortune. So it's also possible that someone could let us know in a non-verbal way, body language, or through a mutual intermediary, that they're interested in us, particularly if they're shy or perhaps they're in another relationship, that they are drawn to us. And that brings us to Venus's opposition to Lilith. That's exact on the 27th. Black Moon Lilith in Virgo is about as sexy as a cold cup of tea. What Black Moon Lilith wants is clean sheets. It doesn't necessarily want intimacy. It will keep a very rigid exterior persona in order to maintain its dignity. But what can happen with Venus opposite Lilith is we could encounter someone who's either going to freeze us or going to surprise us, because there is actually a depth of emotion or attraction that hasn't been revealed. If you're in a relationship which is pretty solid, but it does get tense because of Venus applying to Saturn, and there are some harsh words, what you can do with Venus's sextile to Uranus, exact on March the 26th, from the 26th to the 30th, is to find ways to reinvent it. And that may mean hearing some home truths that we don't want to hear. Those things that have been bubbling behind the scenes that someone hasn't really wanted to say. So some kind of reinvention could create a new spark as March comes to a close. But we've got to be open to flex and be prepared to change. But if you are single, it is possible that someone could come into your situation. The other thing I'd say with Saturn, never forget where Saturn influences, especially when planets apply to Saturn, that can be a time when we get a reward. You could meet someone with Venus conjunct Saturn, but it would have to be someone profoundly sincere. And if it is someone profoundly sincere and you're both totally invested, it could be a relationship that will last. You can't look at aspects in a single and simplistic way, which takes us into April. And then Venus shimmers as it aligns with Neptune. This is truly magical. If you are someone with even one spark of creative artistic talent, it's really going to flourish as you go into April. But if there is someone that you're attracted to, that they're mysterious, they're slightly unavailable, they're absolutely gorgeous, but they don't answer your messages, or you end up suddenly being ghosted, that's Venus conjunct Neptune. So it's going to be important to use the power of Saturn's reality to apply that to the unreality that can come from Venus conjunct Neptune. But if you're with a dear heart, a true heart, it could be the most magical connection as you go into April that you have ever experienced in your life. Remember, you can get your free relationship natal based on your time, date and place of birth forecast. You can have it in Placidus, you can have it in whole sign. If that's what you'd like, please see the link below. Please stay with me for more for your zodiac sign for this transit from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, what is your relationship situation at the moment? Are you bereft? Does it feel that a relationship that's really meaningful is not going to drop for you? And you really want that to happen? My heart goes out to you. I lived on my own for a very, very long time. It's very, very difficult to get those relationships that are truly life-changing. However, one of the things that Saturn in the 12th house has been doing for you over the last year is helping you to understand that if you keep yourself available because you don't get involved in a short-term fling, if you're really wanting the true deal, that availability could be something that this transit can start to address, because it's going to give you more and more information about the psychological dimension of relating. What fears or self-limiting behaviour are you applying to the potential to meet someone? What are the past hurts that you've yet to process significantly enough to create the space to bring someone new into your world? Are you in a relationship at the moment which is not really functioning properly, but you don't really want to leave it? Well, that half in, half out dynamic is not going to bring you fulfillment. So it's a tricky transit, this. I cannot deny it. But it is one, if you really want to embrace it, that your personal growth and understanding of what you really need can explode. And remember, you've got a huge amount of energy developing for you very, very soon. You saw from the event chart, the moon's in your sign. It's very close to the node. It's very close to Chiron. You've got Mercury with you. You're going to have the sun with you from the 20th of March. You're going to have a sensational total solar eclipse on the 8th of April. You're going to have that conjunct Chiron in your sign. There's so much that's just winding up to explode forwards, but you've got to do the inner work if you really want to change the dynamic, if it feels stuck. If, however, you are going through a gruesome breakup at the moment, my heart really goes out to you. I don't feel that relationship breakups, they're just awful. You know, whether a person leaves or goes off with somebody else, or we decide to leave, or someone even tragically dies. It's all very, very tough stuff. Or you could still be yearning for someone from your past that you've never met anyone who quite reached the heights of that connection. And all of this stuff could be washing around you over the next 24 days. But by the time Venus arrives in your sign, forget all this stuff that Venus is detrimented in Aries. It will empower you to explode you forwards. But it's all about the preparatory work of really making sure that you're making yourself available, if you want a relationship, for the prospects that are ahead. And it's inner work that you do need to do, Aries. Taurus, let's think about the fact that Venus is your ruler. So what's the overall dynamic of going through the gorgeous sign of Pisces? Well, it's about actually sharing a future, because it's the 11th house. It's about our highest hopes. You're going to have that fantastic link between Venus and Neptune as you go into the start of April, which could be quite stunning if you're aligned with the right person. But when the event occurs, Mars and Uranus in your sign are in a square. And that tells me if there's any power dynamic around what you want from the future and what a partner wants from the future, and it's different, that can be an issue. If you're wanting to be more sociable with your friends and they're not, that can be an issue. If you're single, there could be someone at work that you're strongly drawn towards, but maybe that's got some professional challenges within the mix too. Also, if you're in a relationship which is okay, bumping along, but not really bumping along much beyond the bottom, that conjunction with Saturn is really asking you a question. Are you going to play safe because it gives you something, somewhere to live, the financial structure? Nothing wrong with that if that is the reality, but it could be starving the more spiritual dimension. And if you are wanting to reach into the highest part of yourself, that's the 11th house. And that's where Venus has moved to. So if you really want to reach for the stars in terms of your relationship prospects, it could be you may have to give something up in order to get what you really crave. Now, if you are single, try to socialize as much as possible over the next 24 days. And even if there are some professional demands that, make that a little bit difficult, or, the availability of friends to go out with, but try to network as much as you possibly can. That's absolutely critical over the next few weeks if you'd like to bring some real rev to your romantic situation. So Gemini, Venus moving into the sign of Pisces is interesting. It could be a point where you ask yourself the question, if you're with somebody, do I want to take it to the next level of commitment? Especially if it's a relatively new relationship, something that's developed, say, over the last year or two, and you're not quite all in. Maybe you haven't moved in together, maybe you're not buying property together, maybe you're not necessarily wanting to get a splice, but certainly make that firm commitment. What Venus in the 10th house is asking you to consider is the status of the relationship, to be honest. But Venus in the 10th house suggests you could meet someone through your professional interactions. And it could be someone in a professional context that you forge a great relationship with that's non-romantic. Venus is about money. The 10th house is about our role in life, your charm, but also your quick wits. And now that Mercury's in a very social part of your situation, forging that amazingly powerful link to Pluto suggests that you can articulate yourself with great skill at the present time, and that can draw admiration. And the 10th house, Venus, loves to be loved, loves to be adored. For you, this is Venus's most daylight exposure. This is where you're really pulling in the maximum amount of attention. So enjoy strutting your stuff, for sure. But of course, with Saturn in the 10th house, it may be that professional relationships, the area that you're going to need to use Venus with great guile. Now, because Venus is forging that tremendous angle with Jupiter later in the month, there could be some fortune in terms of your professional hopes. But equally, I feel it is really, really important to understand that sometimes in life, however much we do bend into the expectations of the organisation or the line manager that we're needing to relate to, it can fall on deaf ears. And in that sense, it's important not to lose your values in order to chase some kind of goal or ambition. So don't give yourself away too much, because remember, Venus can be a little bit superficial at times, but it can be about loot. And there is an opportunity for you to raise your profile, apply for a job, use your personality power to the maximum benefit over the next 24 days. So Cancer, Venus moving into Pisces is beautiful for you because it shares your water triplicity. That's very enabling, very flowy. And certainly if you are thinking about a vacation, the early part of April, that first week as Venus applies to Neptune, would be a wonderful time to head off and get close to nature or the ocean. But equally, that can be a great time to join a fit club. It could be to join a sports centre, because the 9th house can be quite an active part of your situation, and it's pushing you to bring greater variety to bear as well. But what about that connection with Saturn that occurs in week 3? Well, if you are in a relationship and you're a truth seeker and you feel the person you're involved with is a truth avoider, the two competing principles are going to come into a crunch point at that moment. But even as Venus makes its way into Pisces, it's very idealistic. The 9th house is a kind of Sagittarius influence. It's about our higher purpose. But for sure, you could find yourself attracted over the next few weeks to someone from a completely different background, from someone from overseas, someone through a cultural meeting. If you are learning or you're a teacher, there could be some kind of exciting connection there. And for sure, if you are in a relationship, bringing greater variety to bear is very important, particularly with that sextile to Uranus. So things are a bit stuck, a chance to shake things up. But if you're not getting the messages back to your desire to have a really truthful romantic or relationship experience, it doesn't have to be only in a love dynamic, then this is going to be a very interesting next 24 days for you, Cancer. Leo, Venus moving into the sign of Pisces is where Venus really dives deep. The 8th house is about intimacy. So in a way, we could talk about sex, but we can also talk about where we're most invested in the more spiritual context. The 8th house is where we want to give it everything. And of course, Pisces can be like that too. But if you are wanting to evolve your financial situations, some good news can unfold for you over the next 24 days. And it could be linked to a relationship you have with someone else. So for example, a business alliance, or it could be to do with investment. The 8th house can be shared resources, pensions, savings, trust, shares, all that kind of good stuff. But of course, Venus is about relating as well. So maybe it's your skill to connect with different people and soak up different sources of information. If you are very aligned in a romantic context, there's been a lot of energy in your 7th house of late, but of course some of it's been stormy, particularly with Mars. You've probably been setting your boundaries more recently. Maybe it's been in a professional situation. Maybe people have been surprised by how much feistier you have been. But Venus in the 7th house is actually very harmonizing. But you've probably heard a lot of what people have had to say recently. You're programming this through your mind and through your senses, and now you're primed to make your moves. And if there is somebody that you're really, really keen on, and it is even a romantic or a business situation, that alliance with Saturn can really meld you together. But of course the converse can be true. And if there is a troubling situation and you are finding it difficult to get along with a partner, there is no doubt Venus combining with Saturn in the 8th house could be the end zone. And it may be about carving up resources, and there could be some very awkward conversations, painful conversations that you need to go through. But as ever, Venus moving through Pisces is not one-dimensional. You retain Pluto, and at this early stage, Mars in your 7th house. They're your guards, your sentries, protecting your interests, because the 7th house is where we need to be combative. It's not just where we relate, it's where we need to protect ourselves. But if you feel safe, Venus can see you taking that next step into the interior of intimacy. If you don't feel safe, it could be the first step towards leaving what was there and wasn't working very well. So Virgo, there's no doubt about it, ever since Neptune moved into your 7th house in 2012, the potential for magic but also huge disappointment has been immense. Saturn came along a year ago, and that started to make you much more conscious of the true realities of some of the interfaces that you've had with people. Venus moving into this area, I have to be honest with you, is joyful. The 7th house is where Venus really shines, because it's pushing you to try to find points of mutual interest, collaboration, cooperation, that sweet spot between your needs and the other person's needs. As much as Saturn has been a bit of a harsh influence over the last year, may have made you a bit crabby at times, or someone crabby towards you, this brings a much more constructive energy to bear. But it doesn't change the fact that Venus is going to be applying to Saturn. It is going opposite Black Moon Lilith in your sign. And it is then going to go into conjunction with Neptune. So you've got all the seasons, all the different weather is going to be compounded, the cosmic weather, over the next 24 days into this journey for you. It just depends what you want. It depends on your unique status at the start of the journey. It does also depend, if you're involved with someone, what their attitudes and their approach is as well, and you can't control that. The 7th house is where we're trying to get that tipping point right between what we give and need, what we give and need for the other person too. That doesn't need to say that the giving has to be absolutely equal. So, for example, they may give something to the situation that you're not so strong at. You may give qualities that are not their thing. So it doesn't have to be an exact matching energy, but just a sense of the commitment, of the dialogue. And having Venus in the 7th house is very sweet, because it really encourages us to let go of some of the petty details that aren't so good. And one of your strengths is that you grapple with the detail, but that can see you at times struggle with the big picture. So Venus in the 7th house is asking you to focus more on the big picture, and most of all, sharpen up your listening skills over the next 24 days, but equally be insistent that the other people are listening to you. It's not one-way traffic, Virgo, but this is an opportunity, particularly if you're single, to connect to someone. But if you're in a relationship, it can either get better or it may reach a really critical point. It's going to be interesting for you over this period of time. Libra, Venus, your ruler, moving into your 6th house. Well, that's a real interesting one, because I think there's little doubt that you've done a lot of giving, particularly since 2012 with Neptune, then since last year with Saturn Perhaps the giving you do has become more onerous because it's become more physically tiring or constraining. Venus moving out of the playful 5th house, I feel with Mars and Pluto in that location has really been giving you, it's been evoking within you a desire for a more playful, charismatic, perhaps even romantic dimension. But of course, life, when it comes down to it, is a lot to do with how we live in a daily way. Those little thoughtful gestures, those things we do for one another that may be more practical but are really appreciated. For example, one partner's really late for a meeting, the other partner's straight in the kitchen making the coffee, making a quick breakfast, perhaps ironing something for them so they can get out the door as quickly as they can and catch up on their schedule. That kind of thoughtfulness binds people together. That lack of that kind of thoughtfulness separates people out. So if you have been wanting and craving a lot more play recently, I think you are hitting a period of the year when it's going to be a bit more realistic, but you still have that set of planets in the sign of Aries, not least Mercury, the planet of talk and thought, and in the 7th house, very much about relating. You also have the moon as this event begins, and the node and Chiron all in the 7th house. So I think really the potential for you to relate is very strong. You're often wanting to give your best to other people. So I feel that Venus moving into the 6th house is kind of in a way saying, but what do I get back? So it's a bit more back into you marking your territory, being more mindful of whether you do get your needs met. But I wouldn't navel gaze totally through this process, because I still think that you have to accept that part of your nature is as a people pleaser. If you suddenly turn that off in order to try to leverage a better response from the other person, that may not be a particularly positive way to move forwards. But if you're single, there could be a connection with someone in the most incredibly ordinary situation over the next few weeks. I've listed them out to you before, but you know, whether it's the bus stop, the train station, the supermarket queue, the fitness suite, all those kind of very mundane places, because that's where people actually get chatting in a very relaxed way. Also, if you love animals, it's just occurred to me, if you take an animal for a walk, a dog, or it can be a talking point, an animal, a great talking point, you could connect to someone through your pet through the next few weeks. Scorpio, Venus moving into the sign of Pisces, your sister water sign, is house 5. This is marriage territory. Now that's not to say that you're going to get married. You may be married already, or the marriage you're in is going to in some way be troubled. It's just this is the area where we can embrace the more joyful potential of Venus. And the 5th house is to do with play. So for example, if you have children with a partner, their activities and interests may be something that you and your partner can coalesce around over the next few weeks in a really lovely way. If you'd like to add to your clan, this can be an auspicious time, particularly that link with Jupiter later this month. That's brilliant for fertility. But of course, the 5th house is about playfulness, but you've had that cluster of energy, including your two big bruising rulers of Mars and Pluto, in the rather inward 4th house, along with Venus itself. This is a bit of a paradigm shift. You're asked to play, but you've got Saturn in the sector of play. What do you do with that? Well, play hard. Work hard at it. Work hard at having fun. Seriously, this is a great window of opportunity, but it's not handed to you on the proverbial plate. You have to make things happen. So if you have gone through a period of not feeling perhaps so social or interactive, this is the chance to get really stuck in and make that work for you. You have had that new moon. That new moon did forge a very charismatic link to Uranus in your sector of relating. You're still surfing that energy as we come into this new week, but it means that perhaps you've got to live in the moment a little bit more. If someone invites you out, don't analyse it too much. Make yourself available. Practice the concept that playfulness is fine. Practice the concept that you're adorable, that you're really attractive and alluring. All the 5th house. Just really set your intentions. Bring that to you. the warmth and affection, the sun, the 5th house, that Venus in Pisces is perfect for you. Sagittarius, Venus moving into Pisces, is very much about sorting out your home. So if you've been absolutely on the end of harsh weather over the winter months, if you're in the north, or there's been, you've been enjoying the beach in the south, this is a fine time to be thinking about maybe doing some redecoration, some new furnishings, some moving things around in the home to make it the energy flow a little bit better. But also Venus moving into the 4th house could be wonderful for a family celebration or a get together. Absolutely perfect for that. So Sagittarius, that part of you that's really on a bit of a crash course about feelings, which really started with initially Neptune in 212, then Saturn since 223 in the 4th house, and then the new moon we've just had. Now's an opportunity to bring more charm, more panache, more sizzle in a way with Venus. For example, if you're someone who is more of a home lover, that doesn't mean to say that you can't really impress someone romantically. If there's someone you fancy, invite them round and make them a lovely homemade dinner. That's a great way to seduce someone into the power of the more emotional side of your nature. And of course, all the knowledge you'll have will just flow into the evening so beautifully, and they will be absolutely enchanted. But equally, if in a committed relationship it's not really working around the emotional dynamic, or you find it difficult to be together in the same space because you're a freedom lover, that tense point in week 3 of March is something you're going to need to navigate with Venus applying to Saturn for sure. Capricorn, Venus moving into the 3rd house is a blessing. We've seen with Catherine Windsor, a Capricorn, that not speaking, Saturn in the 3rd house, not keeping people informed, Saturn in the 3rd house, limitation, has caused her problems. Then when she did try to share a picture, she doctored it, which of course a lot of people do these days. So that's very much the Mercury-Neptune conjunction, and that's caused mischief for her. So I don't feel necessarily over the last 12 months it has been so easy for you when you've tried to say things and interact with people. For whatever reason, people haven't quite heard where you were coming from, and maybe felt that you were stilted or a bit cold or being a bit funny, even though you weren't. Or have you had a mode of transport that's proved about as reliable as a chocolate fireplace? That wouldn't be a surprise with Saturn in the 3rd house. But Venus comes along with her magic wand, ting, and everything can get lighter for the next 24 days, can't it? Well, yes, possibly. The key with Saturn in the 3rd house is when we say things, we have to really mean it. And if there have been situations where perhaps just in the past you've sort of judged your response in a quick way, 3rd house, but not maybe thought so much about how that's perceived, that's the lesson that Saturn's been teaching you over the last year. What Venus is now urging you to do is to be aware that how we sound, how we shape our expression is very important. It's not just the message, it's how we deliver it. What's that old saying? It's not what we say, it's how we say it. And Venus gives you an opportunity over the next 24 days to say it beautifully. And of course the 3rd house can be very much to do with social media. So your charm and interactions can bring good things to you. There could even be some kind of connection with someone immediately around you, an introduction through a sibling romantically. But if you have different belief systems to a partner, that may be something you're going to be discussing earnestly as Venus comes into that conjunction with Saturn. And if you really have very different viewpoints, there are some big topics that have really caused some big fallouts for people, whether it's Brexit or the response to COVID, or the election in the US, the election in the UK, the Ukrainian situation. People have very polarized opinions on a lot of these topics. And I think it's possible that some of that could come up again in the next 24 days. But Venus is saying to you, try to shape your response as diplomatically as possible. So Aquarius, Venus moving into Pisces gives you one immediate up, an improvement in your financial situation. And even if things have really tightened up since last year with Saturn moving into the second house, which is really entirely possible, or you felt, even if your situation isn't that much different, you felt less valuable within the whole mix, or perhaps, you know, you've been finding it very difficult to stick to a diet. The second house can be very much to do with an attraction to sugar. I certainly struggle with this. You know, my late night snacks, you know, cereal with banana, really not great for my digestion. And that's something that we could be tempted with Venus going into the second house to gorge on those calorific goodies. And if we're lucky enough to have a bit of spare loot, to splash it out on something that gives us some pleasure. Why not if so? But seriously, if things have been a bit parched, you know, like a desert that has had 100 days of no rain, some good news is coming financially. But of course, as Venus applies to Saturn, your traditional ruler, in week 3, it is also possible that there may be a cost. But equally, it may be that the cost gives you something back, so you're building something. So for example, if you make a change in your home, it may require some investment, but there can be an improvement in your facilities. Then again, if you are thinking about business, you know, you've got an entrepreneurial idea, Venus applying to Saturn may mean that you do have to commit some investment, which can obviously feel scary. So doing the research is really important. But Venus is linked to Jupiter in the 3rd week of March, looks very, very positive indeed. So generally, Venus is going to bring some good news financially. It's going to make you more alluring in terms of your sensual energy. You're just going to be purring and giving out this aura that will draw that to you. But in an existing relationship, if there are differences about spending, values, who does and contributes what, that may be the talking point you have to grapple with in week 3 as Venus applies to Saturn. So Pisces, Venus arriving in your sign is absolutely gorgeous, because one of the first things it does is it brings to an end some of the navel gazing of Venus in the 12th house. But it doesn't bring your 12th house energy to an end, I'm afraid, because you still have the planet of transformation, Pluto, and the very stormy energies of Mars. And Mars in the 12th house, in that square with Uranus on this event as it begins, tells you that more stuff could be coming out into the open if you have been experiencing a bumpy time in a relationship. But if you are single, Venus moving into your sign is going to make you feel absolutely gorgeous. Well, I rephrase that. Even more gorgeous than you know you already are. But a wonderful time to give yourself a dazzling makeover, for sure. And take yourself seriously, particularly around your creative and artistic strands. That's often an area that you can be magnificent around. And as Venus applies to both your rulers through this journey, week 3 with Jupiter in a very positive way, and then aligns to Neptune in the 1st week of April. This really can be a time when you can enchant, but you've got to believe it. So it could be a fresh start in a relationship. It could be the point when you're in a relationship still that's not working for you, when you start to actually plan your way out of the relationship, even if the actual separation hasn't quite occurred. That is just a fact. But in terms of how you feel about yourself, give yourself that glamorous makeover. You deserve it. You're gorgeous, but you can feel even more gorgeous, and you can strut your stuff magnificently over the next 24 days. Remember, if you want to get that free relationship natal horoscope, please see the link beneath this video. But for now, thank you so much for joining me. Please do like, comment, share, or subscribe.